Hello and welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman. I have to give a special shout out to my son, Sam. He actually did the intro music today for the podcast in his class, and I said, hey, that sounds like a podcast intro. So that will be our new intro for a while, but I'll mix it up now since I got a couple of them. So I guess I have to pay him some royalties for that. Happy National Athletic Training Month, and today we're kicking it off with a two-time Hall of Famer, Vince Stilger. Vince is currently the athletic trainer at Lanesville High School in Lanesville, Indiana, but had a long and storied career at West Virginia University and a couple other places to start his career that many of you will be familiar with. It was great talking to Vince, and so we'll get it kicked off here. So we're going off the roll with Vince Stilger. Welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman, and we're today here with Vince Stilger. Vince, longtime athletic trainer, both in the state of Indiana and West Virginia. Currently, or most recently, was inducted into the Indiana Athletic Trainers Hall of Fame this past summer, as well as the West Virginia Athletic Trainers Hall of Fame in 2024. So a two-time Hall of Fame member today as a guest on the podcast. So welcome to Off the Roll, Vince.
Troy, thanks for having me, sir, and always a pleasure to speak with you, and looking forward to what we can share and talk about here in the next hour or so.
Yeah. I'm this is one of them that you're one of the guests that I really believe it or not had in mind when I started this project about 3 years ago, which I can't believe it's been 3 years, but there were a group of athletic trainers I wrote down on a sheet of paper, and you were in that top half of people that I wanted to have on. Even though there's not a Ball State connection to that, I think that your story and what you have done in your career is pretty important and a great example for a lot of other athletic trainers that are out there to do things. So yeah, this is a red letter day, right up there with Glen Snow and John Coddington and Rex Sharp and stuff. I'm naming a lot of guys that are in that area that you grew up in. So, but yeah, so how we kind of kick this off a little bit, if you've obviously listened to the other podcasts, is what got you kind of interested in athletic training? What got you started, or who got you started thinking about this for a career?
Well, it's interesting, Troy. I guess it was towards the end of my junior year in high school, and I had been I played baseball for 4 years in high school, and it was hard not to make the team at Lanesville because there were maybe 210 students in the school at the time, so you didn't have a whole lot to pick from. But anyway, I was involved with the basketball program. I think the first 2 years, I was a student manager and a statistician. And then at the end of my junior year, I'm still a student manager as well. Our athletic director, Mr. Ronhart, and basketball coach, came to me and he says, hey, would you like to go to an athletic training workshop? I said, sure. What's that? And so he explained a little bit. Well, lo and behold, the workshop was about 6 or 8 miles from where I live at Floyd Central High School. All right. Because if I would have lived another half a mile further east of where I grew up, I would have gone to Floyd Central because I was right there on the Harrison County, Floyd County line. Yeah. So my cousin and I, first cousin, Donnie Stilger, who, by the way, if you've ever seen the Louisville Slugger bat, and I know you did because I saw a picture of you and some family, my cousin, Donnie Stilger, he was the lead engineer on that project. And anyway, him and I went to this athletic training workshop at Floyd Central. It was all day. I think it might have started Friday evening. It was all day Saturday and half a day Sunday. Well, I went to this and I fell in love with it. And it's funny because the program consisted of guys that were speakers: Glen Snow, Jim Dickerson, Ron Sendry, Roy Don Wilson, Ron O'Neill, Jay Bradley, just to name a few. And so, I mean, I look back on that now and think, my goodness, the heavyweights that were involved with this workshop. And and I think the guys I found out later on, they put on a great workshop, but they partied hard at night, which that crew, we know they're
Yeah.
used to that. So
Yeah.
and then so from that, I um, became an athletic training student my senior year at Lanesville. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I think I ordered the Kramer First Aider course, and I don't know if you ever saw that or were
Yeah.
familiar with it, Troy. And and so I did that and tried to learn, and then I went to IU Southeast for 2 years, which is just about 10, 12 miles here,
Yeah.
and and I worked as an athletic training student under Jim Morris, who was the
Okay.
men's basketball coach. So I did that for 2 years, and then I transferred to Indiana State. Um, and so obviously at that time, if an athletic trainer liked you, they snatched you up and you stay with that sport for the duration of the time you're there. So I was with football for 3 years. So I was at IUS 2 years, then Indiana State for 3 years, and I was with football with Ray Baggett, and but my first year there was Mel Blickenstaff's last year. Mel Blickenstaff was,
Yeah.
obviously a founding father, athletic training at Indiana State, and had a great name and reputation. Had a lot to do with Olympic coverage and so on. So I was very fortunate in that regard. But then Ken Knight, Bob Behnke, Ray Baggett, Katie Grove was there for a little bit,
Yeah.
and so on. And so I got my bachelor's degree, completed that in I think 1980. And it was funny. I was doing all my at the time. All I wanted to do was be an athletic trainer and a teacher at the high school level.
Yeah.
So I majored in health and safety, and there wasn't an athletic training major at the time. You had to specialize, but in
Yeah.
essence, it was a double major. And so my student teaching then, end of 80, was at Hazelwood Junior High Middle School, which is in New Albany. And I student taught for 8 weeks. I taught 3 or 4 classes. In the afternoon, I went to Floyd Central. And Snow he was my supervising athletic trainer, and he says, I'm going to give you baseball. So I basically had the baseball team that spring. And, if I had issues, I would talk to Snow, and, it worked out great. But I did quickly realize that there's no way in hell I'm going to teach at this level. So I went back and got a master's degree at Indiana State, worked men's basketball for a year with Dr. Behnke, and really enjoyed that. And
So let's go back a little bit.
okay.
So who were you classmates with at Indiana State at that time? I mean, that's kind of a, it's not the beginning of athletic training at Indiana State, obviously, but there were some people that
Right.
came through there at about the same time you did that are pretty important people. I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously, Rick Shaw.
Yeah.
Rick and I were in the same class. Rick was with men's basketball, and like I said, I was with football. Melissa Martin, do you know Melissa?
I don't know Melissa, but I know
Melissa
who
was
she
at
is.
Yeah, she was at South Carolina, then Mount St. Joe's, and
Yeah.
now I think she's out at Rocky Mountain. I think she's still working there.
Yeah.
Um, Bill Carmody, I don't know if you knew Bill. Bill was a manager as well with men's basketball. Bill was from Colorado, ended up
Okay.
going into the priesthood,
Okay.
and Bill became a priest. And Bill passed away here 10, 15 years ago. I can't remember from what, but just a funny guy, just a
Yeah.
good guy to be around. I'm trying to think. Glenn Brickey was a year behind me,
Okay.
Bellucci,
Yeah.
and we had some other guys that I'm not sure they stayed in athletic training. Don Davis, Dan Schaefer, and so forth. So
Yeah.
there were a couple classes that were, a year or so apart, and we interacted, did a lot of things together, and so forth. But yeah, That's off the top of my head. That's who I can think of first and
Yeah.
foremost.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like, um, in that age, of athletic training, there was a lot of like, let's throw you out there and see what you can do type thing.
Oh yeah.
You had people that were like keeping an eye on you, but basically it was you, and you had to kind of figure things out, kind of. And so, did you feel like some of your experience that you did in high school helped you a little bit along the way?
Well, I didn't really have a great amount of exposure my senior year in high school because I just didn't see a lot. And then my spring semester, I was pretty much tied up with baseball.
Yeah.
The student teaching experience certainly did help me in that regard. But I do remember one year at Indiana State. I think it would have been my first year there, so I would have actually been classified as a junior. Um, because of my 2 years that I spent at IU Southeast. But my spring semester, I got assigned to baseball because I was a big baseball fan and I kind of mentioned it. And I don't remember who made the decision, but they said, we're going to put you with baseball. It might have been Dr. Benke. Well,
Yeah.
Ray Baggett wasn't very happy, but it was a great opportunity for me. And, um, and I must have did something right because Coach Warren wanted me to come back for the following fall, of which,
Yeah.
Ray wasn't going to let that happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think other than football, that's the only exposure, other sport that I had. And but you're
Yeah.
right. They said, okay, this is your sport. I had no supervisor basically whatsoever. Um, and you if there was something I couldn't handle, which there were a lot of things I couldn't handle, I
Right.
would try to talk to Dr. Banky, Dr. Knight, whomever, and read up on it as well and try to learn as much as I could and figure it out. And
Yeah.
I would tell students a lot that today when I was at West Virginia, FIO. And they're like, FIO, what's that? I was like, figure it out.
Figure it out.
Okay. So um so yeah, that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
There was a guy on that team, was our catcher, Bill Hayes at Indiana State. He was the number one draft pick for the Cubs that year. Played for several years with the Cubs, and
Oh,
then just
wow.
retired from major league coaching here a couple of years ago. But great guys on the baseball team. And when I would come home, there was one of our starters from Forest Park High School, and I would, if he knew I was coming home, I'd drop him off at Ferdinand
Yeah.
and then come home, then pick him up on the way back to Indiana State. So, um, but yeah, those were great experiences indeed
Yeah.
as an
Uh,
undergrad.
did did um did you and Rex Sharp cross paths while you were at New Albany?
Troy, I don't think we did. I remember you know Don Ogle?
Yeah. Well, I've met Don once, and yeah, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, see, Don was at New Albany. Don was at New Albany.
Yeah.
I think maybe during that time, and I can't remember if Rex was there before or after him.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but I
think
think my go ahead.
no, I think Rex was student teaching somewhere around about that time. I could maybe a year later, maybe 81 or something like that, but
Okay. Okay.
he was student teaching or he was at New Albany for a year before he went up to Michigan Tech, and it was right around in that area. So that's the reason I asked. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, no, I'd say my first real association with Rex was when I went back to Indiana State in '85. ISU and Ball State obviously would play each
Yeah.
other in football, but I think I'd been around Rex a couple times prior to that. Either through state meetings,
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
IATA involvement, and so
Yeah.
on.
I always when I talk to Glenn, I always think it's interesting that there's like this kind of this little circle of athletic trainers, in that area, um, between Glenn and Bruce Scott and you and Rex and
Yeah.
um, it's I think it's really interesting to to see how there's just kind of this origin of that, and whether that there was some influence on because of Glenn having that camp or not, who knows? But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
um,
And then I think too, it just kind of shows the tentacles of Snowball, Glen Snow, of what he did and the contacts that he had made. Um, I don't know if you know Tom Bossing. Tom was a student of mine at Indiana State and went to Vanderbilt to grad school as a
okay,
GA, Tennessee State for a couple years after that first job. And Tom's probably been at Vandy for the past 30 years as a head
yeah,
athletic trainer, director of sports med. Tom did his student teaching at Floyd, as
okay,
Glenn Brickey did his student teaching at
yeah.
Floyd. Um, did Brian Curlis do his student teaching there? Do you remember?
That's a good question. I mean, that very well may have there's a connection there some way, so that may have happened. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe
yeah,
even Rick Peters, and so on. So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, even though, like you said, there's a huge Ball State connection there, but there's still others
Oh yeah,
that because of Glen Snow and student teaching, which a lot of people at that time did. I
yeah,
mean, you were a teacher, athletic trainer, and I think for yourself to really be marketable at that time, that's how you had to promote yourself.
yeah,
And so yeah, so but it is neat in this area.
yeah.
I have a couple of former students now that are in this area from Indiana State that aren't in athletic training, but they might be teaching at Scribner Middle School or
Right.
uh, working in chiropractors' offices or whatever, this and that. So yeah, it is neat how there is a little nucleus
Yeah,
here of ATs and the history involved with it.
yeah. Well, I mean, and then um, Glenn's brother-in-law. I mean, Rod. I mean, Rod's connected in there somewhere too. Correct? Yeah,
Oh yes,
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. So, well, so before I interrupted you, you were saying that you finished up your master's at Indiana State, right? You decided to get a master's degree, and then that led to what
Yep.
next?
Well, I was at Indiana State for 1 year for my master's, 80, 81. And then I I like I said, I thought I wanted to be a teacher and athletic trainer at the high school level. And it's like, nope, I'm going to work at the college level. And so I was looking for a small college. I applied to a lot of different, several different jobs, but I was fortunate enough. My first job was at St. Joseph's College, which you're very familiar with, Puma
Yeah.
Land. And I was there from 1981 to 85. And I don't know if you ever met Brad Smith, but I'd followed Brad Smith at St. Joe's. Brad was leaving, and he was going to PT school. I think it would have been Indiana Central at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and so then I went to St. Joe's and had a great experience. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Didn't make any money,
Oh,
as you
no,
well know.
I don't think that anybody ever said that they made a lot of money at St. Joseph's College. Um,
No, no,
but they do say they had a
just
good time there.
yeah. If you don't have a good time at St. Joe's, it's your own damn fault.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I remember Sean Comer, when I came, because I was, it's not like it is today where you could find a college job and sneeze and find a college job anymore. Um,
yeah.
it was tough, and I remember Sean looking at me going, "Hey, listen, we're not going to pay you a lot of money, but you and I are going to have a damn good time," and he was absolutely right. I mean, I think back
Oh my God.
on all the just those 3 years, but that first year in particular where I think my liver probably went through some spasms in that year on a lot of ways. So
Oh, mercy. Puma, I tell you what, they were great kids. They didn't have they didn't have the most athletic ability in the world, but man, they came and they worked their butts off and just good kids. I mean,
yeah,
as you well know, we had a lot of kids from the Chicago Catholic
oh yeah,
League and a lot of kids out of Indianapolis, Catholic schools out of Indianapolis
yeah,
and so on. And I kind of think that's what they focused their recruitment areas and so on. But And I'm not sure the 4 years I was there, 81 and 85, if football even ever finished above 500. And if they did, it might have been maybe a game or so.
Yeah.
But, but it was just good kids, didn't have a whole lot of facilities to work with
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and so on. But, and
It,
you
it,
covered, yeah, I think at the time there were 23, 24 sports, and you basically just tried to cover football and basketballs, and then football again in the spring. And if anybody else was injured or hurt, you looked at them, treated them, rehabbed them as best you could, and moved on.
who were some of the
So
coaches that were there when you were there?
the football coach was Bill Jennings.
Yeah.
Was he there when you were there?
Bill
What
had
year were you there, Troy?
retired. Bill had retired probably 2 or 3 years before I got there. But Bill was still around
Okay.
and still teaching some classes, and his wife had just passed away by the time I got there. It was like maybe
Yeah, she was a
6 months.
super lady.
Yeah, 6 months to a year
So
before.
Was Bill Reagan the head football coach when you
Yeah.
were there?
No.
Okay.
So, well, the year before. Um,
Okay.
he'd been the head football coach the year before I got there. Yeah. Yeah.
See, now Riggs was the defensive coordinator
Uh-huh.
when I was there the last 2 or 3 years. And then I think when I left in 85, my last year, Bill Jennings had retired. That's right. He had retired from coaching, but has stayed on
Right.
as an instructor.
Well,
And then Bill Reagan took over.
yeah, he couldn't retire as an instructor because he needed to give at least 2 years notice to clean out that office that he had. So,
Oh, what a mess that was. What a mess.
so even back then it was
You're
a mess. Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah, I remember
Oh,
walking in there and going, Bill, how can you find anything? And oh, it's right here. It's one of those guys that he can find whatever you need to
oh.
ask for. It was an absolute mess. But um,
Yeah, that's funny. It,
yeah,
it was interesting too, because Bill Reagan always he loved Notre Dame
hmm
and always talked about Notre Dame, and his goal was to work there at some point. Well, I remember when I was at West Virginia, this has probably been 20 years or so ago, we had Notre Dame in a home and home series.
uh-huh.
And Bill was with them, not as an on-field coach, but in some capacity. And I knew he was with them. I didn't realize it, but I intentionally looked him down, and we chatted just for a few seconds. I hadn't seen him in many, many years.
Yeah,
So, um, but um, but yeah, that was just good people to work with. I really enjoyed working at St. Joe's.
yeah. That I can say was just the camaraderie, particularly amongst the athletic staff. Um, it was kind of like we're all in this together. We don't have a lot of money. Maybe our budgets aren't great to do a lot of things, but we're gonna make it the best experience we can for the kids and enjoy what we're doing and I think that's the thing that um, I missed the most about that was just that camaraderie. I remember one time, we were um, probably my second or third year there. We were trying to find some ways to raise some morale in the athletic department. So we got a Puma bus and we went to the casino up in Gary or Hammond or something like that. I mean, here we are rolling in, which would have never happened at a state school ever.
No, no.
No, but
Oh
we all went to the
man,
casino, I remember we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. I mean, so,
that's
but
pretty.
that was just something that we were going to do it, and we did that, and of course a lot of time spent at the wagon wheel, and
Oh, how about Wagon Masters? Were those
oh,
the best or what?
the wagon master. I mean, I had triple bypass surgery in 2020, and I'm sure that there was some remnants of the wagon masters that were in those arteries with
Oh my
that when they
goodness.
bypassed them. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I
um,
tried to get involved with other things on campus too. I was a faculty rep to a student hearing board or something. And you remember the Little 500?
oh yeah, yeah,
I drove in that to the
Oh my
last two or
goodness.
3 years I was there. Oh, it was so much fun. Yeah, so much fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that was
I had Gatorade contacts at the time.
yeah.
So, gosh, what was the guy's name out of Indianapolis? He was a Gatorade rep.
Oh, Mike Mills?
Uh,
Was it Mike Mills?
no,
No.
this would have been before your time.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can see his face. Anyway, but I called him and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be, driving one of the drivers in the St. Joe's Little 500, and I need some stuff for our pit crew." So he sent me some towels, some T-shirts, hats, and they all had our Gatorade stuff and the pit crew. So
Oh my
it was
goodness.
pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how much interaction did you have with Dixie Green, the nurse, the school nurse? Do you remember
Oh,
Dixie?
quite a bit,
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
I
liked all those nurses were so sweet.
yeah.
And what we have 5 docs that we worked with,
Uh-huh. Like the
and
Ayler, Miss Dr. Ayler, I'm trying to think of who else they worked with, but
Dr. K.
Dr. K, yes. Yep.
Uh, and you quickly figured out which ones to send athletes to and which ones not.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but no, the nurses were wonderful. Um, yeah,
So and there was such
really
a
enjoyed it.
there was such an athletic history there with the Bears having training camp there and stuff. I mean, um, it was that was a part of kind of the fringe benefit of working there because Dixie. I remember Dixie telling me stories about, back in the '60s when she was obviously a lot younger back then, but Joe
Yeah,
Callis stories or Dick Buckus stories or how there'd be all sorts of shenanigans in the dorms during training camp and stuff and
yeah, yeah.
it was
It was funny. I remember one time, it must have been like 82, 83, and I don't remember where the Bears went when they left St. Joe's, where their training camp was. But anyway, they were looking to move their training camp, and so they were looking at 3 places. They were looking to come back to St. Joe's, a place in Wisconsin, and I don't know where else. And so anyway, they said one day, they said there's going to be a group representative from the Bears come down and just walk through the campus, view facilities, and so on.
hmm
Well, I'm in the training room one day, early afternoon, and the door swings open and walks and walks. It's Mike Ditka,
Oh my goodness.
okay, who was the head coach of the Bears at the time, and he just stands there. And what an intimidating, imposing looking
Yeah.
guy. Fred Cato was the athletic trainer. I think the GM. There were 4 or 5 people there, but he just stops and he looks around and he goes, "Damn, this is the same shit in the training room now that we was back here." Oh, I said, "Well, if you guys come down here, I need some more. I need some more equipment then."
Yeah.
So, but they ended up going. I think they ended up going to Wisconsin Platteville, I believe.
Yeah.
But that was kind of an interesting interaction there.
No, I mean it's the truth. I mean, I think that there was probably stuff there that when you were there in the early to mid '80s that were still there when Sean and I were there or when I was there
Yeah.
in the mid '90s. Nothing changed a whole lot. I mean,
No,
um,
it didn't.
it
No,
it
it didn't.
it
When did Sean get there?
Sean got there in '94 maybe 90 end of '93 maybe '94 because he
And
was
when did
there
you get there, Troy?
in '95, the fall of '95.
And when did you leave?
The fall of '98.
So did you go to St. Joe's directly from Utah?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you
Um,
might have been, were you the first assistant, full-time assistant?
no, they hired Bill Cowgill for 1 year because Bill was trying to get into grad school and was having some issues getting into grad school. So he worked at St. Joe's for a year and then got into grad school at the University of Arkansas. And then when he left to go to Arkansas, that's when I came in. So, and I was kind of
Okay.
looking to
Gotcha.
stay, if I could stay in Indiana, that was going to be cool because my grandparents, I mean, we still had a farm in Boone County and my grandparents were getting up there, and you know, I kind of want to be around for that. So yeah, it ended up being a really good fix. I met my wife there. So she was straight out of, she had just finished grad school at Ball State, and she was working in the new core building, um,
Okay.
doing audiovisual stuff. And so, um, you know, there was a group, we laughed. There was a group of us that were like single guys, and a group, some girls in the admissions office that were single girls, and then my wife, and we were spending a lot of time together. A lot of time together that
Yeah.
first year. Yeah. And so,
How about Core 11? Were you ever in Core 11?
yeah, we had I actually talked about this with my daughter this weekend because she's 15, and we were staying in New Albany. We had dinner at that is it Bella Rosa downtown New Albany, the Italian restaurant.
Yeah, right next to the Grand Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the guy that I was with got a glass of wine or something, and they're pestering us about, you know, his daughter who's 16 and my daughter who's 15, like, oh, can we try some of that, you know? And we're like, no, you can't really. And they were like, we want to try champagne sometime, and I'm like, yeah, let me tell you about champagne. It'll come back and bite you. And Core 11, we had like a New Year's Eve party at Core 11, and that was the thing that was free. And I swear it probably had been on the shelf for about 3 or 4 years anyway.
Uh-huh.
And it's the only time I ever had a hangover that came back and visited me later. Like I had a hangover when I got up in the morning, and then I went over to Sean's. We were watching the Rose Bowl, and about midway through the Rose Bowl, probably about halftime, I remember just having the worst headache, upset stomach. I was laying in the middle of the living room floor. They're all laughing at me. And after that, I had champagne at my wedding, and I've never had it since. So there you go. Yeah. Core 11 was, Sean told me, he goes, when the students are here, you stay the hell away from Core 11. And I said,
Oh,
not a
really?
problem. Not a problem. I can do
Oh,
that. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that there was so much uniqueness, um, to that campus. It was so small. You knew what everybody was basically doing,
oh
you
yeah.
know, you
Yeah.
couldn't really hide
Yeah.
anything. The kids knew that too. They thought they could do that, but I mean, you know, it was just too interconnected to do those things. And, um,
Yeah. It was
you
like
know,
growing up for me, it was like growing up in Lanesville,
I'm
just
sure, yeah,
because for all the same reasons that you said. I mean, over the
yeah,
summertime, a lot of us, guys and gals, we would go out to Lake Benet,
yeah,
um, the lake that was back there at the edge
yeah,
of the property. So yeah, good
yeah.
times there.
It was, and of course we had D1 camps in the summer there. So Jerry Hoover's there. Uh, there was just a lot. There was a lot going on even during the summertime,
Oh
and
yeah, the
and
BC
so
was it the BC All Stars basketball camp?
I don't know that might have been something. No, it was
Yeah, there were.
there's all sorts of, yeah, there was stuff. What they were trying to generate revenue any way they could. So, you know, renting
Yeah,
those facilities out was a priority, to do that.
yeah,
Was
yeah.
was Dan Peters the head basketball coach when you were there?
No, it was Bill Hogan.
Bill
Actually, you know
Hogan
what? Let me
was.
back up. Before Bill Hogan was George Wagner,
Okay.
and George. Oh, he was a funny guy. And one of his assistants was Dave Smith. Dave Smith later became the girls basketball coach. Well, he was the girls basketball coach as well at I think at St. Joe's, and went to Shippensburg and PA, and then was at Bellarmine in Louisville for many years.
Yeah.
Dave Smith was. But then George was there for a year or two, and then Bill Hogan came in as the AD and basketball coach. And
Right.
um,
And
yeah,
I
so
think
yeah,
Dan probably followed Bill. Um,
I think so too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So who followed you as an athletic trainer at St. Joe's?
Oh, that's a good question.
Was it Ray
Um,
Borelli?
no, it wasn't Ray yet. I think it was Steve Barrett. Did
Okay.
you know Steve?
I've heard
Steve
that
was in
name. Yeah, I've heard that
Steve
name.
was in grad school. Well, let me back up a step. Two of my students at St. Joe's was Jeff Clevenger and Jeff Franciosi.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were aware that
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were
they had told
homeless,
me that. Yeah.
but then they both, I pushed them to go to grad school at Indiana State. And Jeff Franciosi graduated a year before Clev. And so Jeff went to uh, grad school at ISU and got his master's in a year. And Cleb went back and started working at Wabash Trailer because he didn't know what he was going to do. And I had forgotten this. He said I called him after I took the job at Indiana State in July, and it must have been end of July or so. I called Clev and said, "Hey, what are you doing? We need another GA." And he goes, "I'm just working at the trailer, Wabash Trailer." I said, "Get your rear end down here." Well, he came down and he
Yeah.
was missing a prerequisite or two, but he got in and got his master's, and I
Oh my
think
goodness.
Lafayette Jeff's the only job he's ever had.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
uh, but
Again,
Clem
these,
and Franciosi were great to have around, and
oh, I'm
just
sure.
just super kids. Worked hard, and we laughed. Oh my gosh, did we laugh and
Yeah.
have fun? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So again, how do you get from St. Joe's to Indiana State?
Well, I um, Dr. Benke had reached out to me and said, "Hey, we might have an opening." And this was probably in the spring of '85. And I said, "Okay, I'll keep it in the back of my mind." And I didn't hear anything for a while. And then a month or two later, I think he reached out again, and I saw the position, and I applied and interviewed, got the job, and I think I moved to Terre Haute probably in yeah early July, as football was going to start then in August. So I went in as the athletic trainer, but really my only sport coverage was football.
Okay.
And so I did that for 3 years. And then Dr. Benke was getting out as program director, and that would have been '88. So then I transitioned into the program director role and kept the head athletic trainer with football coverage as well. And so I stayed there, Troy. I left in December of '90. So I was there for 5.5 years, 6 football seasons.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and from there, then I went to IU and got my, started on my doctorate. But then, yeah, I mean, once again at Indiana State, just good kids, and didn't win a whole lot of football games, great students. I
Right.
really enjoyed being around the students and
Yeah.
interacting with them as much as I could, and teaching them. Um, like you had Beth Harrell on. It's like I emailed her after I figured out who it was,
Yeah.
and I called her Betsy Wetsy because I don't know if you remember, I had 7 sisters. All
Yeah.
right, so they always had Betsy Wetsy dolls,
Yeah.
and just tiny little dolls. Well, Beth was what, about 4'3", and
Oh, yeah.
uh, so I called her Betsy Wetsy. But I had great kids that came through Indiana State. Robert Cullen, Tom Bossing, Tom Ivanich. Did you ever know Evo?
No, I did
He was
not.
at Logan Sport.
Okay.
Okay. Um, Julie Bowman, just had great kids that came through there.
Yeah.
And, uh, Becky and Jan. So I was really blessed in that regard to the
Yeah.
students that I had at ISU.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's I mean, it being in that kind of that same time frame as a student, I, I, I always thought I was blessed that I could come in and you had some level of supervision, to help guide you along and stuff. You weren't completely on your own, but you kind of were given the freedom to do some, as you were learning, to do some different things. And before it got to the direct supervision and stuff like that. And I'm never sure what was the best way. I think we're probably a lot more scientifically based now, which is great. But some of those experiences, I can't. They were invaluable, to do that, because I
Oh,
remember
you're
when I went
exactly
to.
right.
I mean, and we talked about that on Mark's podcast. Mark was just. Um, he was there as the athlete trainer at VU and was teaching classes, but I mean, we were the ones that were traveling with basketball. I mean, I remember going out to Hutchinson, Kansas, my first year, with the VU basketball team going, these guys are Division I prospects, and what am I doing here? What? How
Yeah.
did I think throughout my career, if I wrote a book, it would be like, how did I get here? That's the thing
Yeah.
I
Oh,
would say.
yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
how did I get here?
Exactly.
Some farm boy that grew up milking cows who taped a couple ankles in high school, and how did I get here? And that's the thing is that, but I never felt alone in doing that. I always felt like I could reach out to somebody and help out. And it sounds like your kids probably could have done that too, and or did do
Oh,
that too.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And,
and to have that mentorship and that teaching right there, even though you may be away, not present, but it was always there. Um, that's what I thought was always cool about the whole experience at that time. So, yeah,
yeah. And it was trial by fire when you sent a kid with a sport and on the road, not having a lot of experience. A lot of coaches understood that. Some coaches didn't, made it much more difficult. Um,
probably
and
the McNichols of the world just didn't quite well, but John loved his students if they bought into the track program. You know,
yeah, yeah,
if they were
yeah,
just there getting hours, it was not it was not
yeah,
John was not
yeah.
happy about that.
No, no, yeah. You're exactly right, Troy.
Uh,
And obviously that just the way he ran his program, it was, and you could tell the success that he had.
yeah,
And that was very much reflected. Okay, be a contributor rather than a taker. And I think that's really important in anything you look to do is be a
yeah.
contributor and so on. But yeah, it was those were great experience for students. Now let me ask you a question. Were you and Beth in the same class at VU?
We were, yeah, yeah,
And you visited Indiana State.
right,
Uh,
yeah.
yes, and I think the two of you might have came up at the same time. I'm not
We
sure.
Yeah, we did, and it's the here's the story is that Beth and I were very. I mean, I wasn't competitive, but Beth was, and I love that about her. But but there she was like, you're gonna go to Indiana State, and I'm just gonna be following you around the whole time. And I'm like, that's not necessarily true. Oh yes, that's what's gonna happen. And um, so I was dating a girl at Butler at the time, and I told Mark, I said, hey, Ball State's got an athletic training program, and it's certainly a lot closer to Butler than Indiana State. So, so
Oh my
let's just
gosh.
make this easier for everybody, and let's go. Let me go visit Ball State, um, and so and it was weird because at Ball State, where I probably met with you, Beth and I met with you and talked to you. I don't know if we met with anybody else. But when I went to Ball State, that's when Ferrara was there, but he was out at Penn State, finishing up his doctorate. And so I met with Cindy McKnight. And Cindy's like, yeah,
Okay.
we never had a transfer student before, so I really don't know how this is going to work, but we'll figure it out. And I came
Yeah.
out of there like, okay, well, I went back and told Mark, I'm like, hey, I think it's going to work. So that's what it was. I think either way, Beth would have made her own way too, and she did.
Oh
And
yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and I would have had a good time because you got to think that in Beth's class, I think was was um um was Jared. I think Jared was in that class. I can't
Jared
think.
Hall.
Jared Hall was in that class.
Jared Hall.
Yeah, Jared
Yeah.
Hall. Yeah, Jared was kind of in that group. Who else was in that group? Was
Oh
the guy that
geez.
was long time at Rensselaer. Um, oh, I can't think now. I can think of all sorts of names way back when, but
I think well, I just hung pictures. I have all my classes, most all my classes from St. Joe's up through West Virginia hanging on a wall in my basement.
yeah,
And Um, I just hung up Beth's class. It must have been last week, but I think it was Beth, Jan Clifton, Chris Stippick Shephers was in that class.
Yeah.
Dave Horton, um,
Excuse me.
Lisa, Lisa Nobby, Missy Cappers? Missy
He
might
was
have
a
been
year
in.
ahead of Beth.
Okay.
He was a year ahead of Beth.
Maybe I'm confusing her with that class, but um, yeah. But those are some of the students that were there at the time. Chris Yakey, Dave Horton, Julie Blocker. So I think all those kids, some of those kids were probably a year apart. It was interesting too, because when I was done at ISU in December of 90, and I had every intention of going back to Indiana State
Right.
um, after I got my doctorate. But um, I would hear quite a bit from those students that were going to graduate in May of 91. And I think Beth did graduate in May of 91. Is that when you graduated from Ball State?
No, because I was doubling majoring in health education. Um,
So it took you 4 years.
it took me 3 years at Ball State. So I graduated in May of '92. So um,
Okay.
so I
All
got to
right.
Ball State in
So,
'89 in the fall of '89, and then I went to because that was my intention too, just like you. I was going to be a high school athletic trainer and teach in school. And I remember I did my middle school observation experience at Delta High School, um, right when they were teaching sex education, and I'm like, yeah, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this without
oh
cracking up,
boy,
laughing. I can't sit there and we had the guy that was teaching it was an old. He had to be in his 60s, and he was like straight out of
old
the
school.
the sex education film. Yeah, exactly. And um, and then I got the internship with the Eagles, and I was like, I just worked in NFL. I think I can just do this. I don't need to teach. I can just do athletic training. I'm good. And 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 I remember sitting down with Rex and Tony, and they're like, we always wondered why you were doing that anyway, but we weren't going to tell you you couldn't. And so
Uh,
so I dropped that, and then I had a couple of other classes I had to. My last semester at Ball State was like, I remember I took a basketball class. I took a really good class, Women in Health, and I was the only guy in that class.
uh,
But it was good
oh,
because it
really?
paid off. It paid off when I worked gymnastics. I'm the
Well,
guy.
I'm sure.
I had to teach my daughter about her menstrual cycle. I mean, because my wife's like, talk to your dad. He's the one that took the class on that. Um, so, um, it's things like that. I mean, there were some things that were helpful to do that. But Beth had been. I remember talking to Beth. She was up in, I think, um, working at St. Francis or something like that. And I'm like, how is it? What's going on and stuff. And so, yeah, because we still came in contact. But um, I it was if we both came up there, it was going to be fine. That's what I told her. If but I felt like I had to go do something else. So yeah,
Well, you made the decision to go to Ball State based on a woman, and
yeah, yeah. Who dumped me?
so
Who dumped me that summer? That's the thing. She dumped
okay.
me
I
that
was just going
summer.
to ask you that. All
Yeah,
right.
she dumped me
Oh,
that
that's funny.
summer, and
That was a valuable early lesson for you, Troy.
yeah, it was. But it turned out really good. Obviously, and
Yeah,
so sometimes
super.
I don't question the decisions that you make. You just kind of roll with them, and it worked out really well. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Learn from it, move on.
yeah, yeah. So what? I mean, you're in that working. You're doing the director position. I mean, was your thinking like, hey, I'm gonna go get my doctorate and then come back to Indiana State and kind of fill that role with Dr. Binky and Dr. Knight? Kind of what was your thinking with that?
Well, it was interesting, Troy, because my position, I'm pretty sure at Indiana State was 100% academic. All right. Because when I got there, I was teaching probably two classes a semester,
Yeah.
and I think I was given release time to be the head athletic trainer. And when I look back on that now and just compare it to today's world, I mean, there's just basically I was doing two full-time jobs,
Yeah.
is in essence is what it was. Um, but so ISU said you have to get your doctorate in order to be promoted and get tenure. But that's all I had to do was get my doctorate to gain tenure. I said, okay. And they would have, by the time I left, they were going to stop the clock on me. And I was going to go for a year and a half, do my coursework, um, take my comp exams, go back to Indiana State, and then I think my position was only going to be academics. There would have been no clinical.
Right.
And the more I thought about that, the more it's like, you know what, I'm not ready for that. Um, and so I decided, you know what, I'm going to stay at IU. I'm going to finish my doctorate all the way. I didn't want to be an ABD. There's
Right.
a lot of ABDs out there. So I wanted to get it done. And so I resigned from Indiana State. I stayed at IU. Um, I finished my dissertation. That's really all I did my last year at IU was work on my dissertation.
Right.
Collect data, literature search, write, and then finally defended it. I think in the summer of '93. And but I worked football at IU for 2 years
Yeah.
when I was there. I volunteered, and I reached out to Kip, and Kip said, "Yeah, well, you'll bring you on." And so I think I worked the '91 and '92 seasons. I worked spring ball as well, and just had a great time. Very appreciative
Yeah.
to Kip for allowing me the opportunity to do that, and met some great people. Once again, had some great students I was around, and
A really good
so
time to be at IU football too. I mean, yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. And that first year we went to a bowl game.
Yeah.
And because they had a long dry spell afterwards. But so yeah, that's I was teaching classes. I think because I had a doctoral assistantship. I think I was teaching 3 classes a semester. I was taking classes as a full-time doc student, and then I would volunteer with IU football. So I was pretty busy, but I've been used to being busy on my ever since I started in athletic training.
Exactly.
So that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just decided that I still wanted to do some things clinically, and I thought if I went back to Indiana State in just an academic position, that I would. I wasn't ready to give it up clinically.
Yeah.
And I'd been in it clinically for 10 years at 4 at St. Joe's and 5.5, 6 years at ISU. So that's when I changed my thinking in that regard and decided to do what I did. And I look back on it now, and it was a good decision for me at the time.
Right. Yeah. Because academically, I mean, going back to Indiana State, Dr. Knight was still there, correct? Was
Yes, Dr. Benke.
and Dr. Binky were still there. So you would have been the third faculty member in that area, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I was and those two, um, their primary involvement was with the graduate program,
Right.
and um, and I was primarily involved with the undergrad program.
Right.
But it was interesting too when I went to Indiana State. What was it? In 83 and 84, 1983 and 84, I got to ISU in 85. Dr. Bakey was the head of a trainer with football, but still had his academic responsibilities. His assistant was Ken Knight.
Yeah.
All right. And they had great success. The football team did during that time.
Yeah.
And
I heard the Bob Warren stories when I was there. that Bob
The
would,
Bob Wards,
or not the Bob, Bob Elson.
Banky.
No,
Oh, Bob Elson.
Bob Elson. Yeah, Bob would tell me that
Yeah.
Dr. Binky would be out at football practice. Dr. Knight would be in tabulating his research or something, and Dr. Binky would come in and yell at him to get back, get his fat butt out there to football practice. And
Oh, I'm
Bob
glad you
Elson would
I'm
just
glad you said it,
laugh.
not me, Troy. Oh,
He
Bob
would just,
Elson, what a classic.
yeah,
What a
he would just
classic.
laugh. He goes, "You're not going to have anybody like that, are you?" I'm like, I don't think so. No, we're good. We'll be good. Yeah.
Oh. Did you go to Indiana State from St. Joe's?
So I went to Indiana State. Um, so I'd actually interviewed the year before, and they gave that job to Michelle. I can't think of Michelle's last name. That's when Dave and Lori were there, and Chris
Okay.
Ingersoll was the department chair. And I interviewed, and it was fine because I was getting married in '97. I had a lot going on. A new job would have just wrecked stuff. I'm sure would have made
Yeah.
things a lot more complicated. And then the next year, Lori calls me up. It's the end of August, and she goes, um, she goes, "We need a new assistant athlete trainer here, Troy." And I go, "Well, I don't know anybody, Lori." And she goes, "We don't want anybody. We want you." And I went, "Really?" I said, and she goes, Dave and I wanted you the first time, but the academic people wanted Michelle to teach classes and stuff. This is just going to be clinical athletic training. Um, she goes, it's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be track and field for 1 year, and then we're going to review it and see what we can plug you in at. Dave was trying to get out of football, is really what it came down to. So, um,
Okay.
so I did that for a year and then went to football after that. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the again, like you talked about, just like St. Joe's, there were some great people at Indiana State that I truly enjoyed talking to and remembering. I distinctly remember, Dr. McDavid walking through the hallways, and he would
Oh
stop and
yeah.
ask me if everybody's still wearing his knee braces. Yes, Dr. McDavid, we're all still wearing your knee braces. It's okay. It's good. Have you had any knee injuries?
Oh,
Nothing that happened because they were, your knee, no MCLs. We're good.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Wow.
and then, you just had a good network of people there that were especially athletic. I mean, Andy Myers was the AD, so Andy was
Yeah.
terrific as an athletic director. So, um, it was good. So, yeah, yeah,
I remember I think it was my second year there. We played a money game, which um, some of well, I call them money games for the athletic department. But we went to Iowa State, I think, in '86. Our starting quarterback and running back tore an ACL. We had a dislocated shoulder, and somebody fractured their forearm. And I think after that game, we won one more game the
oh,
rest of the year, but we were just decimated that game
yeah,
physically and paid the price for it. And yeah, but that was different. Where we played Purdue, went to Florida, Iowa State. I can't remember who the others were, but those were the big money games that sustained the athletic department basically.
yeah,
But we paid the price for it
yeah,
from a physical standpoint and an athletic training standpoint as well.
yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
think in 2000 we played Oklahoma at Oklahoma, Bob Stoops' first year. So the year that I think
Oh
they won the
wow.
national championship. Yeah, it's same deal.
Okay.
I mean, we actually had a C1 fracture. Um, and I
Really?
spent the weekend in Oklahoma City. Yeah, with this kid. He was okay. Was in a halo for 4 months. But yeah, I'm like, and Tim McGuire was the head coach at the time, and he goes, I hate these games, but they're a necessity, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we just hopefully can play um, somebody that's not going to decimate us like that,
Exactly.
to get a money game done.
Exactly.
But it's
Yeah.
funny because I found when Mike Leach passed away, Mike Leach was the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma at that point in time, and I found a
Oh,
picture of
really?
him. Yeah, I found a picture of him and Tim McGuire and Bob Stoops talking to each other on the internet. It was crazy, um, and
Okay.
and I kind of sent it to him because we're on Facebook, and he's like, "I remember that. That's kind of cool." So, um,
I'll be
but
darned.
yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, so anyway, this is not about me.
Hey, now wait a
So
minute. Let's
yeah.
backtrack a second. You said they hired Michelle. Was it Michelle Sandry?
No, 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 no. It was Michelle. I can't think of her last name. She was a former student. Um, I can't
Okay.
think. But
No, no big deal. Because
Michelle Sandry was there when I was there as a
okay,
faculty person. Yeah.
but she ended up leaving, and she came to West Virginia, and
Yeah,
we
she
worked
did.
together. For, I don't know how many years. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
She actually was interesting. And we're going to tell stories here, but when I got there and I introduced myself, she goes, "Where'd you do your undergrad at?" And I said, "Ball State." And she goes, "When?" And I said, "From '89 to '92." And she goes, "I interviewed for the women's athletic because Ball State had separate athletic departments back in the '80s."
Yes.
Yeah, and
Right.
so she goes, "I interviewed for the women's head athletic trainer's job there." Um, like in 1988 and didn't get it. They gave it to a person. They gave it to Vicki Graham, and so um, she goes, "So I could have been your supervisor," and I just went, "Oh, okay,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
I'll be
okay,
darned.
yeah,
Small world.
yeah." It is a small world. So, um,
Yeah.
so you finish up your doctorate at IU, and then you spend a year in Cincinnati. I mean, how does that come about?
Well, I was looking for a position. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to, work in Big Ten football for a couple of years with Kip. I wanted to still do something clinically, and there just wasn't a whole lot
Oh yeah,
out there.
yeah.
And I kind of a knee jerk. I took the job at Xavier. About 2 days into it, I was like, "This is a bad move."
Yeah.
I mean, good people, but it just wasn't for me. It was 100% academics.
Yeah.
I was going in as an assistant professor in the program that they had just started. They called me about a month before I was to start, or a couple of weeks, and said, "Oh, by the way, our program director just resigned. You're going to be the new program
Oh
director."
wow.
Yeah, so I went in there and probably taught 3 or 4 classes a semester, and there weren't many students. I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6,
Yeah.
maybe 6 or 8 total. And just try to do the best I could and made some connections. And I thought, you know what, I hate to do this after a year, but I need to move on. And so I started looking for some positions. And I saw there was an assistant football athletic training position at West Virginia that was open.
Yeah.
And this would have been in the spring of 94, because I was at Xavier 93, 94. Um, so I applied and I didn't hear anything. Well, one day I get a call, and it was from Denise Massey. And Denise was the interim program director at WVU. And she says, she introduced herself over the phone and said, asked me, she goes, "Would you be interested in the program director's position there?" And I said, "No, I'm really looking for a clinical job."
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, we'll allow you to do some clinical work." I said, "I'm looking primarily to do, stuff with football, or do some, keep my hands involved with football."
Yeah.
And and then I got another call from Jack Brodigam, who worked with John Spiker. Spike had a clinic at the time that he was starting. I don't know if you've ever met John Spiker.
I've not met John
Um,
Spiker. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
probably have you heard his name at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just a
So
wonderful, wonderful
yeah.
individual. Real.
So background. This podcast got inspired by Jerry Kolosky's podcast.
Oh,
Jerry.
really?
Oh yeah, he does a podcast
Yeah,
with his
he was a
daughter.
WU grad.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. That's so my buddy that I went to grad school with, like, hey, you gotta listen to this podcast, and so I was listening to his podcast, and I'm like, man, I can do this. There's lots of people I can talk to. I can do this. So he had Spiker on. He's had Marucci on. He's
Jack
had
Marucci.
yeah, he's had all those guys on. So as well
Oh,
as a lot of
cool.
UNLV basketball players and stuff like that. But they've kind of slowed down a little bit, but it's still a good podcast to listen to. So yeah, that's what
I
inspired
might
all of
have to
them.
dig that. Yeah, I might have to look for that. I like Jerry. He's a good guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's
but so
called Cuddy
anyway,
and the Cooge, is what it's called.
it's called what?
Cuddy and the Cooge. So I think he calls his
Cuddy.
daughter the Cooge, and he's the Cuddy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
so
then I get a call from I get a call from Jack Brodigam, who's Spike's secondhand man at the clinic that Spike is now running. Because Spike started the program at WVU as a program director, and then was also the head athletic trainer. And then he just started this little clinic on the side, basically in a closet, which is now about 8 clinics today. And so
sounds
he
a
kind
little
of pulled
familiar.
himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He kind of pulled himself away from the academic side of it, but stayed on with WVU football as an athletic trainer and a PT, and then um, and focus more so on developing and building up his clinic and so on. And so then I get a call from John Spiker. And so then I said, well, go ahead. After thinking about it, I said, go ahead and move my file over to the program director position. Well, then
Yeah.
the dean calls me. All right. Well, I'd make a long story short, I ended up going out, must have been in the first part of June, interviewed, and and I got offered the job right before the convention. I don't remember where the convention was that year. It would have been 94.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I hadn't accepted the position yet. The dean called me like on a Monday. I said, well, I'm leaving tomorrow to go to the convention. Give me a week to think about it and I'll let you know. I'll call you after the convention. So I ran into Spike he says, he goes, well, make sure you come to the W alumni party. So I go and I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And he's introducing me to people. It's like, yeah, this is our new program director. And I'm thinking, holy shit, I haven't taken the job yet, Spike. But but lo and behold, I ended up taking it. And it was a perfect fit for me. It
Yeah.
really was.
Yeah.
Just good, some of the best people you'd ever want to be around.
Yeah.
And had a very solid program and reputation. And I
Right.
was just trying not to screw that up. And so I went in. Yes, I was program director and assistant professor. And it's funny, a lot of people here, because they only think that I was the athletic trainer at West Virginia. It's like, no, my position was 100% academics. But I would work football training camp doubles.
Yeah.
And I'd go over on our busy day of the week, which was Tuesday, was our big hitting day, and I'd work home games. I'd work a couple of road games here and there. I'd go to Marshall, Pitt, because they were close.
Right.
When we were in the Big East and we played Louisville, I'd come back and work the Louisville
Right.
game if we were playing here, and might stay with family for a day or two and then head back. But I thought it was really important in two regards. Number one, it allowed the athletic training students to see me in a different light other than their advisor and in front of the classroom. And so, and that just helped to build rapport. I thought rapport and credibility with our students. And number two, it certainly helped me to keep my clinical skills up, but I felt helped me and maybe a better teacher in the classroom.
Yeah.
Right. Because oftentimes I would try to utilize and capitalize on teachable moments that maybe we would see with this injury or that injury, or, and share stories. Students absolutely love to hear stories.
Yeah.
Okay. And if they hear a story where they can take and relate that to an injury situation or an evaluation or a diagnosis or diagnostic imaging or whatever it might be, for them to put it all together. And so, and not that I was a storyteller in classroom by any means, but there were often times, if the situation presented itself, I would always tell a story or two related to the topic at hand. And it's just funny how kids would come back and say, well, Vinny, I remember you told us this story about this and this, and they would put it all together, but they would always relate it back to the story that was told regarding the injury or the situation or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I worked football for 20 years, program director, and then I had to, this was a publish or perish position because WU is a Doc 1 research institution. And research was not my forte at all. But it was kind of interesting because when I got there, it was kind of disorganized, the program was. And then we had to work towards a major. So my first probably 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years there, I was just trying to get things organized and then trying to put together a major in athletic training major, which we did. I think it got approved in 97 or 98. And then at that point, I really started hitting the research hard.
Yeah.
And that was a question mark of whether I was gonna be tenured or not, because I had so much of my publishing I did in a period of about 2 to 3 years. And I think I had 10 or 12 things published, and in research articles, book chapters, and so forth. And so the P&T committee, promotion and tenure, said, we really debated on your case quite a while because all of your information, all your publications were in such a short period of time. And I just basically explained to them, here's the reason why. I felt the program was in a little bit of disarray, work on trying to stabilize it, and then working to put together a major, which is not an easy thing to do at a university because there's a lot of hoops and windows you got to jump through to get that accomplished. And people that don't know anything about athletic training and sports medicine are asking you questions.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I guess I got to dumb this down and make it as simple as I can just for them to put their signature on it and move it on to the next step and so on.
Sindri has told me the same thing, that when he was working on that major, that he told me the same thing. He goes, you got to learn how to talk in front of some people that have no clue at all.
No, none whatsoever. None whatsoever. And so, but just had, great kids. It was funny. We would have, once we really got the program going and established, there was a streak of probably 10 years or so there in a row. And I was there for 24 years. We would have 100 plus, 125 kids that come in as pre-athletic training majors.
Oh, wow.
Thinking that, okay, I want to be an athletic trainer. And I'd go into that first, and I was very stern. I didn't really have a whole lot of time that I spent with these pre-athletic training majors because my focus was with the kids that were in the program. And our kids got accepted at the end of their freshman year.
Yeah.
But I'd walk into that first meeting and I'd say, now I want you to look around, person on your left and the person on your right. There's about 100 and so many of you in here. 15 of you maybe are going to get into the program. Okay. It's funny. The next day, 15, 20 kids would change their major. And that's fine. And but we had a very pretty extensive selection process that we had developed. And it was a pretty good process, and it worked well. And we had very good kids that went on and did a lot of neat things and that graduated from the program and so forth. So it was pretty neat at the time. For many years, there were more athletic trainers with degrees, more athletic trainers working in the NFL with degrees from WU than any other institution.
Yeah.
And but that has since kind of fallen off. But I think it's just simply because of the way um, the change of education from a bachelor's to a master's degree
Right.
is has
Yeah.
changed some of that and so on. But I can still watch a game, Alabama men's basketball, LA Rams, Denver Broncos, and just, WWE,
Oh yeah.
Houston Astros, San
Yeah.
Diego Padres, and former students of mine from WVU that are
Yeah.
working in these situations. So,
Yeah.
and it's pretty neat. It really
Yeah.
is.
It's your legacy. I mean, that's the thing. You always wonder if you're making an impact or not, and in a lot of ways, I mean, and it's at different levels, but your impact is there, um, and that's the legacy that you um send out to the profession and what it does, and whether anybody else recognizes that or not, which I think there are people that have recognized that for you, but you can kind of put that in your back pocket and go, yeah, I had an influence on that, and that's to me is tremendous because again, from what who you learn from and where you came from, it's just perpetuating that knowledge further, and that's I think that's important, and that's why it's good to have these discussions so that other people know about it as well. So yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right, Troy. I mean, if I look back on it, some of my first mentors are Glen Snow and Bob Binky and Ray Baggett, Ken Knight, um, and Kip Smith and so on as you go down the line. But then you as a working professional, you develop your own criteria and your own approach, and but you take everything that you learn, and not only from athletic trainers, but from administrators and colleagues and so forth, and you develop your own philosophy and your own approach, and that's how you utilize it and approach it, and you try to keep up to date with what's going on. But then I referenced this earlier, but then you look at it and it's like, wow, just look how far the tentacles have reached
Yeah.
to, okay, the kids that are working, former students that are working in a high school, those are in a clinic, those are as a PT, those are as a chiropractor, those are that are in med school, those are that are physicians, those are working in the NFL, those are working in WWE. I mean, it's almost kind of mind-boggling. And one of the things that I look at, there'll be students that will reach out to me maybe 2 or 3 years afterwards. And it's like, Vinny, I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I get it now. And, I just want to thank you for what you did for me at the time. I certainly didn't appreciate it because, I was young and dumb and immature,
Yeah.
and I fought everything along the route. But looking back at it now, it makes sense to me, and so thanks. And those type of things mean a lot to me.
Yeah.
Um, I've even had kids. We kind of did a thing at WVU. We would do a senior dinner with seniors that were graduating and their parents, and it was really a pretty neat thing. But kids would get up. I'd give them the opportunity to get up and speak, and they'd say, things that were very heartfelt of what the program meant to them, and how they all. And we really tried to create a closeness in a group and a unison amongst them, and I think we're really able to do that as you look back on it. I must say that the W Athletic Training alumni base is truly a unique group,
Yeah.
and I tried to pull them in as much as I possibly could into the program. Um, we did a. It's funny this summer in July we're having the 50th year celebration of our athletic training program at WVU,
Cool.
and I'd organized and put the 40th one on, and it was basically a weekend. It started Friday night and it went through like Sunday at noon, and it's going to be kind of the same thing. And Jerry Koloski was very involved with helping us do that and put it
Yeah.
on and so on. But one of the things that was so cool, I thought, and I didn't tell anybody this except one other person about the day before, we had the big celebration Saturday evening up in Touchdown Terrace, which was a club that overlooked
Right.
the football field. And we had WU athletic training up on the marquee, on the ribbon boards and everything, and the scoreboard. But I'd had it set up to where the DJs, I said, okay, when I give you the cue, I'm going to want you to announce everybody go down the football field. And they did, and everybody was down there like, why are we here? And then I gave them the thumbs up, and they started playing Country Roads over the loudspeaker in the stadium. And so everybody just got in a circle, arms, and
Yeah,
just sang it. It was really, really cool.
that is
So
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I,
But like Jack Marucci came back, and just so many of the older alums, and
right.
and so I'm really looking forward to going this summer as well.
Oh yeah, that will be tremendous. I mean that and that's where we're kind of in this on a smaller version, we're kind of in the same situation at Ball State is that um with me retiring and then Neil kind of retiring a little bit. I just talked to Sean Comer this morning and I said we need to now take the ropes of this whole Ring of Honor thing and really start working on trying to get that to where it's been at conventions and whatnot, but we need to get it to where it's on campus and we do something really special on campus, invite people back. And so thank you. You just gave me a great idea. That maybe it shouldn't be just an annual Ring of Honor ceremony. Maybe we just need to have something every 2 to 3 years and celebrate the fact of the history
Exactly.
of the program because it is unfortunately now there's a little bit of a disconnect with the entry-level master's program and alumni and stuff like that. And I remember at convention this year we had a very small alumni gathering, no Ring of Honor or anything because both of our Ring of Honor recipients couldn't make it, um, and there was one student there that came from the entry-level master's program, and she looked at me and said, we were all introducing ourselves, and she's like, these are the people that we've heard about, but we've never really met. And I said, wow, I'm surprised they even still talk about it. So I said, but that's the thing is that there needs to be a little bit more of a connect there and trying to do those things with that. But a reunion is a great idea, and maybe that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And we certainly have the resources to do something like that on campus, and that would be really cool. But um,
Yeah. You should look into that because, like I said, our 40th anniversary celebration, it was so well received.
yeah.
And they're like, Vinny, are you going to play in the 50th? I said, hell no, I'm not going to be here. So, uh, because that was 2015. I retired in 2018,
Yeah,
and I got out at the right time because at the time I just wasn't a big advocate for the entry level masters. And so it worked out great for me,
yeah,
but and then and it's worked out very well for me here as too at Lanesville.
yeah.
But yeah, I truly
Well,
had a wonderful experience at WVU.
yeah. Well, before I get started, because we are going to talk about Lanesville, because I want to talk about that a little bit, but I do
Okay.
want to talk to you about probably your longest tenured position as an athletic trainer, and I figured it out 37 years as the head athletic trainer director for the Special Olympics. Um, that to me is I mean, not only does that tell you how special that is, but it's a credit for you and your staff of I would call it a cast of characters because I know some of those people that help you out at Special Olympics. Um, I mean, again, kind of give me a little bit of that story on how you get involved in it. How do you stick around for 37 years?
Oh, Troy. Well, I tell you what, I can remember the phone call like it was yesterday. And it was probably, I guess it was 88, 87, 88. They called. And I guess they had their state special games, Special Olympic Summer Games in South Bend one year, and they moved to Terre Haute.
Yeah,
Well, a gentleman by the name of Mark Scudder, who was with the Special Olympics office, just called me out of the blue And I remember him calling me, and I'm sitting there at my desk like this, and I was like, oh my God, I can't do this, you know.
One more
And
thing, right?
yeah, exactly. One more thing. And so I was like, I said, let me see what I can do, and I'll get back in touch. Well, we put something together. I think I did it. I covered it primarily with myself, grad students, and undergrads from
Right.
ISU, and so we did that the first year, and then we had a couple of volunteers that came back every year. A gentleman by the name of Danny Thomas was at a high school somewhere in Illinois, and he would help us. Do you remember? Do you know Bill Kinsey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Bill had a brother, John, who was in Special Olympics. John's
Okay.
a great kid, and I still see John recently, as 2 or 3 years ago. Bill would help us. Steve Schindler would help us.
Yeah.
Um, and then we decided, well, let's reach out to the programs in the state. And then we would start getting kids from IU and Purdue and Manchester. And I think the IU involvement, we really had a lot of kids from IU when I was down there for a couple of years. And so
Yeah.
kids would come up and help there. And then we started getting this core nucleus of about 10 or 12 people that work it every year,
Yeah.
and they come back, and they have just kept coming back, some of them for as many as 18 years now,
Yeah.
18, 20 years. And we have the darndest time. We have a great time. And I mean, it was tough. There were times I'd leave on Thursday, and um, Thursday at noon, I'd drive to Indy. I'd have dinner and stay at my sister's house with her and her family on Thursday evening. I'd drive over to Terre Haute early Friday. Uh, I'd work, from Friday night till through Sunday at 1 or 2 o'clock. I'd always stop when the Special Olympics were done, and I'd go visit with Dr. Benke and his wife for an hour or two at their house,
Yeah.
and then I would drive back home to West Virginia. Well, many times I would make it to about Greencastle, and it's like, I am exhausted. If I don't pull over, I'm going to die. And
Yeah.
so I would pull over and take a nap, and then I'd drive back. But then I would come back to Lanesville instead. It was only 3 hours, and
Yeah.
I'd spend the night here with family. Then I would go back to Morgantown. But um, that I've had great Special Olympic directors. Dennis Schmidt was the very first one. Mike Furnish. Now it's Jeff. I'm thinking of Jeff Moeller is our Special Olympics director now.
Yeah.
But I just have great communication, and I set up the schedule. Everything is basically done online now,
Yeah.
and make the schedule and communicate that way. People can reach out to me. We still get new volunteers,
Right.
and the games start on Friday at noon, and we'll go to about 4 or 5, and then we have opening ceremonies in Holman Center, and then we go to the Valley for pizza and beverages, and then we get up on Saturday and work from about 7:30 till about 10 o'clock, and then go to the Valley for pizza and beverages, and we Sunday goes from about 7:30 till 1, and we're done, and we pack up and we go home.
Yeah.
But just, and the people that come back and work it every year really enjoy it. And
Yeah.
and we enjoy the camaraderie with our group of athletic trainers. And like I said, it's pretty much a core nucleus.
Yeah.
But then we have people that come in, and they might do it. It's like, I really had a great time. I'm going to be back next year.
Yeah.
So I feel like that our core group just keeps getting bigger to where, we probably have about 20 volunteers
Yeah.
every year now that come back and work it. And, if your heartstrings aren't tug on during that weekend, then there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
because first of all, we're in an altruistic helping profession, and any little thing that we can do to give back, and particularly for Special Olympians, it's really quite special,
Yeah.
Troy. And it was interesting. One year at WVU, I had a young man as my student there, he said, Vince, I'd like to go back with you if I can and work Special Olympics. And so he came back with me, and now he's our team PA. He's a physician assistant for WVU Athletics. I mean, he's just a super young man. Um, but yeah, so that's how we do it every year. And
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing about it is that like you said, it's the people that have a that are we all are volunteering in some sort of way of different things.
oh yeah,
Um if that's your niche, then awesome. And that's the thing is that uh I think that example of service that and it's a thing where maybe a lot of people know about you helping kind of leading that with your group, or a lot of people don't know. You don't care because you just are there to help, and it's one of the few things
exactly.
that we do, that we just do it to help out, and it's enjoyable. And you get a lot more out. I mean, as much as you're serving those participants, they're pouring as much into you as you are to them. And
That's
I think
exactly right, Troy.
that's the thing,
Yeah.
is finding those things that you can be involved with, um, is important as an athletic trainer. I think it's what keeps you, um, that's the one thing I see a lot of younger athletic trainers talking about, how hard it is to deal with coaches, or how hard it is to deal with parents, or how hard it is to do those, things didn't go well for me today with this or this. Go find something else that people will truly appreciate you for who you are,
Mhm.
and still do your job or look for another job. I don't care what you do, but if you find those other things that you can connect yourself with and do those things that is truly that gives you joy, then go do those things and still be an athletic trainer. You don't have to quit. You can go do those things. And I think
Exactly.
that's the thing, like I'm heavily involved in 4-H, and so that's my thing that I like to do for youth and kids, and be involved
Good.
with. That's my deal.
Good.
Um but I think that's the thing where, um don't sit there and mull over the fact about how bad you have it. Go find something and make something positive out of it, and
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that.
And some of the athletic trainers, they created a private Facebook page. It's called Athletic Trainers Unite for Special Olympics.
Yeah.
And it's just those athletic trainers that have ever worked the Special Olympics Indiana Summer Games. And so, they'll communicate that way. And, we have everybody's cell phone number. And,
Yeah.
um, but one of the things that's really cool too is, that there's been turnover in the Special Olympics staff. Um, but oftentimes these people on the staff might go to other jobs and take other positions, but they may still come back and volunteer at Special Olympics for that weekend. Mark Scudder, who reached out to me,
Yeah.
he was there for 3 or 4 years and took a job elsewhere, but he has come back every year, and he's the now PA announcer at track and field for track events, track
Yeah.
and field events for Special Olympics. And so I always make it a point when I go over to the track, I go up in an announcer's booth and and say hi to Mark and pester him
Yeah.
and so on. So you also create these contacts um, with others, and you create these friendships and bonds that are really pretty special. And one of the neat things that they do is, on Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning of Special Olympics weekend, we'll have a staff meeting at 6:45 a.m. And there's probably 30 or 40 individuals that are in on this staff meeting. I mean, you're the head of the delegation of, sports medicine or parking or souvenirs or residence life. And so the first thing that Jeff does, he's like, anybody have any special stories you want to share? And so people will tell stories that had happened the day before, and they share them with the others. And some of them are just so touching. And
Yeah.
oftentimes they have a hard time even completing the story because they get so choked up about it and so on.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work, and you burn it hard on both ends, but it's so worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I still enjoy doing it. So as long
Yeah.
as I still enjoy doing it, I'll keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the one thing that you can say consistently that you've gone on and done other things, but you get to go back and do this every year because it's what you
Yeah.
love to do. And I think that's important you have to have those things in your life. You have to have, it's funny,
Oh
like at
yeah.
Easter this week, the superintendent, the week before spring break, they do these things called passion projects. So the kids come up with ideas to do different types of things. Some of them community service, some of them are learning opportunities, whatever it is. It's outside of school and they get time away from classes, to do these different things. Like our strength conditioning coach that we have wanted to set up a disc golf course on campus on at the school grounds, and so we have enough room we can do that. And so they've been out, the students and he have been out there working on setting up this disc golf course so that people can come play disc golf when they want to. But it's something that the kids are interested in and they're passionate about, and they can go off and do those things. And I think teaching young people to have a passion and follow that is extremely important. And you've done that with your group with Special Olympics. Like you can do something totally out of your comfort zone from an athletic training standpoint and still have a good time, but make an impact and again, have something come back to you a little bit. And so that's
Yeah.
why I
And
wanted to make.
it's kind of neat, Troy, too, when we get these first year volunteers, whether they're an athletic training student or they're working their first year as a in a professional setting. And they are often, you can just see it. They're uncomfortable and uneasy because they've never been around this type of special needs individual.
Right.
But it's it's very warm to watch them as the weekend goes on, how they just kind of relax, and then they come back the next year because obviously it touched them and it meant something to
Right.
them, and now and it kind of breaks down a wall oftentimes too that I feel that they have about, okay, if I'm being around someone that's Down syndrome or special needs and so forth, and and then not only are they more comfortable there, but it helps them in their own personal interactions with individuals and so forth. So
Yeah.
it's kind of neat just to see and view and watch that transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine because I mean, um, you have to, and I may be wrong in this, but I think sometimes you see them for their special needs, but when you come back and work with them a little bit, you see them just as a human being that
Exactly.
is exactly just a person. They're just a person, just like you and me.
Exactly.
They just have things that are a little bit different about them, and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's the thing when you look at the person component. Just like we talked about, when you look at people, you are taking care of people, um, not somebody that has special needs, and that's the cool thing that I think goes along with that. So you retire. Well, I knew we were going to get to this. You retire, and were you kind of you decide to move back to Lanesville? You and your wife said, "Okay, we're going to move back to Lanesville." And did you kind of go, "Okay, what am I going to do?" Uh, or did somebody approach you and say, "Hey, you're here. You might as well help out with this"? How does this all come about?
Well, bef- probably about 5 years before I had wanted to retire, I threw it out to my wife about, okay, I think I'm going to retire in 2018, and maybe I want to move back home. And she said, well, it's funny. Let me backtrack. We first started dating. Melanie is from Pittsburgh, and I told her we first started dating. I said, I'm moving back to my hometown when I retire. And she's like, sure you are. I said, no, I am. And so I gave it 5 years to work on her, and she did reluctantly, but it's kind of neat there towards the last 3 or 4 years at WVU. I did football for 20 years and I'd had enough. And then I didn't do a sport for a year, but I was president of the WVATA as
Yeah.
well. We're trying to get licensure passed. So I was very involved with that. And in the last 3 years, I volunteered with WU baseball and really enjoyed working baseball there as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Great group of guys. And so I knew I needed to work and do a little bit of something. I can't just not do anything. Um,
Yeah.
so I was going to substitute teach. Well, I even went to a training session and I was like, wait a minute, you're going to pay me $75 a day to be with a bunch of hellions, okay, in the classroom that have no desire to want to learn. And then
Yeah.
my uncle and first cousin were school bus drivers for New Albany, Floyd County schools.
Okay.
They said, why don't you be a bus driver? Because we had a big family reunion that summer that we moved back, and we were back maybe 2 weeks. And so I'm in this first training session for a substitute teacher in New Albany, Floyd County. I was like, I'm not doing this. And so I looked into being a school bus driver. Well, I could make more money and be around kids about 4 hours a day as
Yeah.
opposed to being in a classroom 8 hours a day and make half as much. So I did that. I'm a school bus driver for 3 years in Albany, Floyd County, 2 years at Lanesville because they reached out to me and I said, sure. It's 3 minutes, 7 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
But then I knew I wanted to be an athletic trainer yet still too, but I didn't know how to go about it. So I looked things up, researched, and found this gentleman by the name of Kent Chapman, who's now my supervisor. He's the coordinator for Baptist Health. And Baptist Health has about 12 high schools that we have outreach
Uh-huh.
to. And so I called him, I cold called him. He said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And so I did. He kind of paused for a second. He said, are you interested in a full-time job? I said, not really. I said, where? Let me think about it, but I'll give you a call tomorrow. And I called him back the next day and I said, no. I said, if I could work at Lanesville. He goes, well, we have an opening at Lanesville. And one thing led to another.
Yeah.
My contract is basically 10 or 15 hours a week. There's no football, which is great. Our girls basketball was state champs, back-to-back
Yeah.
state champs in 23 and 24. Our best player tears her ACL at the end of the first quarter of the 24 state championship game in Gamebridge. And I tell you what, the building was so quiet. It's pretty cool. Out of 8 schools in the state championship, Lanesville sold the most tickets that day. We were the smallest school.
There was nobody in
But that's
town.
just that's what little towns, small towns do, Troy.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And and she tore her ACL, and we come back out at the end of the second quarter, towards the end of the second quarter. I think we were up 2. I was like, holy crap, we got a chance.
Yeah.
And we ended up winning by 8. It was just an emotional roller coaster of a day, just highs and lows, up and down. I even remember calling Snowball on the way back from Indy to Lanesville for the big, ticker tape parade. And I could hardly even talk. He didn't answer the phone, but I left him a voicemail. But I was kind of an emotional wreck, but it was really pretty special. It really was. So, yeah, I'm in my 7th year now at Lanesville, and I usually go over about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, do any treatments or rehab, anybody that needs it. But primarily it's event coverage, game coverage.
Yeah.
I don't have to travel or so forth, anything. So, yeah, I still enjoy it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing is that I think that when and you can attest this. I mean, you kind of knew it was ready. You were ready to retire when you were ready to retire, and then to kind of land into a position um, where you can have some fun, where the kids are
Oh, yeah.
great. Um, there's a comfort level of being like you're back at your old high school, which has changed a ton since when you went to high
Yeah.
school. But there's still the familiar names and the people and stuff like that. Um, and um, and you kind of then you get to go back and kind of share some of this experience knowledge that you've had over the years with these kids that have no idea um, about like hey, yeah, I can get you back. Really? You can do this?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I can do this. um, and where did you learn this at? That's the thing I get all the time, is that I'll do something and they're like, so where did you learn this at? And I go, well, this might have been a little something from the Eagles, or this might have a little bit of something from Utah, or maybe a little something at Ball State, or at Indiana State. I may have learned this. Who knows? But somebody told me, somebody said, you're so knowledgeable. We're lucky to have you. And I said, no, you are lucky, the fact that you get to benefit all my mistakes that I made along the way in Division I athletics that I'm not going to make here. That's what you get.
Yeah.
You
That's
get
very
the
well put, Troy.
Yeah, you get the benefit of me screwing up someplace else before I got here. And it was just we were laughing about it and stuff too. And I said, that doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes here, but I certainly am not going to make the same mistakes I did in other places at other times. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's the thing, is that there is something about being in a place where um, the folks are just down to earth, and they're great folks, and they're supportive. Um, and that's where I'm at. I have a great athletic director that's basically the same age as I am, so we get along famously. Um, and and that's the it's just a comfortable place to be, and the freedom to do whatever you want to do. And
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, is I talk to my friends that are still in college athletics, and it's it's terrible. I mean, you're in good spots, but um, there's a lot more involved, I guess you would say. There's a lot
Yeah.
more voices
Yeah.
and people and whatnot, and I just don't find that at the high school level right now. I mean, it's very much
Yeah.
like it used to be early on in college, where you were the person and you got to help them or direct them to where to go to get the most help. And so,
Yeah.
um,
I
yeah,
remember when I first started Lanesville, it was a funny little thing happened. I probably hadn't been there a month or so, and one of the moms came in, and this is something I never had to deal with. I never had to deal with parents in
yeah,
the past. Obviously, in the high school, you do.
yeah.
I wasn't prepared for that, but so she came in and it's like, well, my daughter's got this and this and this, and I said, well, yeah, so we can take care of that. She goes, well, we've been going to Becky Clifton over at Floyd Central, um, and she's been taking care of us, I guess as a friend of the family or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, well, that's great. You can keep going to Becky. She was one of my former students. And the mom, you could just tell, it's like, well, okay, well, maybe this guy knows what he's doing then. So, but that's no big deal. If they want to go to Becky, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's not like Becky doesn't have enough to do, but it kind of her reaction was kind of priceless. So
Yeah. Becky was one of my former students.
yeah,
Yeah. No, it's
yeah, yeah,
um, I think the thing that I think's funny, but and at the same time sometimes drives me nuts, um, are these little middle
yeah,
schoolers that come in that obviously are still trying to figure out how to talk to adults. And I have a middle schooler. I have a son that's in middle school and stuff, but I've tried to teach him, like, this is how you talk to adults. But they'll come in there with their entourage. That's what I call them. Oh, you brought your entourage with you. They don't know what entourage is, but you brought your
no,
entourage with you, especially girls. They'll bring their entourage with them, and they'll come in and, like, I've got this knee pain, and it started like, well, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago, but maybe like at cheerleading camp this summer, it bothered me. And I'm sitting there listening to all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it could be terminal. And they're all like, ah! I don't know. Your
oh,
career could be over. And then I'd laugh. I'm like, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So have a seat. Let's take a look at it and stuff. And it's mild tendonitis or something like that.
oh, I
Let's
know.
do a
They
couple
don't
steps.
really, they don't really understand what pain is.
No, they don't. They don't. And And so I think that's the thing, is that your education level for your athletes and for your parents, I mean, yes, starts a little bit at the ground floor, but if you can, you've been there 7 years, you've probably seen a transformation of, hey, this is what Vince wants to do. This is this is what this is, or the older brothers or sisters go back and tell their younger brothers and sisters, oh yeah, this is what he's going to have you do. This is what's going to happen. I'm just
Yeah.
now 3 years at Eastern. I'm just now starting to see a few of those things come up. Or
Okay.
I talked to my older friend, and they said, this is what I need. I need to have you look at it, because you really help them, and you can help me do this. And so, um, just being able to educate those people so that they kind of have a better understanding of what athletic trainers do, number one, but number two, that you can help them. They don't have to try to endure all this stuff, or go
Yeah.
see somebody that, like, we have a guy in our community that does cupping and all this other crazy stuff. I think he's like, he might have his CSCS. I don't know. I just try to stay out of that as much as possible. But I'm always teasing those kids. Are like, I'm going to get cupped today. I'm like, oh, you're gonna look like you hugged an octopus. Okay, go on. You go do whatever you want to go do. That's fine. If you when you want to come back and get stronger, or do some exercises, or not have to go see that guy every 2 weeks, then come see me, and
Yeah.
I'm good. We're
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, that's funny. That is, and it's so true. But yeah, and also too, what's cool is, I mean, I'll look at anybody. I'll look at anybody,
Oh
and I've
yeah.
looked at teachers, I've looked at staff, I've looked at uh, people on the school board, I've looked at townspeople. I mean, and if I can get them in to adopt faster,
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
And I might give them some simple exercises for, telefemoral pain, whatever it might be. And, I try to explain some things to them. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to look at anybody and refer them if I feel they need referred.
Yeah, I just got a text from our assistant principal before I got on with you, that she's got some upper trap pain and stuff, and I've got one of those canes in the athletic training room, that you can do self massage. And I
Yeah.
showed her that a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago, and she just texted me and she goes, "Is that cane still in your room? Can I?" I said, "Yeah, it is. And by the way, you need to grab a hot pack at the hydroculator there in the corner and do that before you start working on your upper trap." Oh, thank you so much. Da, 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 all this other stuff, and I'm just laughing. I go, it's the
Yep.
assistant principal. What is going on? But you're right. You
Yeah.
treat
Yeah.
you treat everybody, and you
Oh,
see
you do.
you see different people that have questions and stuff, and it is what you do. I mean, it's that little bit of care that you may provide to your community, or um, the community that you work in, that helps kind of promote that's, to me, is grassroots promoting the profession, that we do know what we're
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about. We're competent.
Yeah.
We're great healthcare providers. Of course, we can save you money, because most likely we're not going to charge you for the advice that we give you.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it really is, and then hopefully that carries on, long after you're gone, and
Yeah. And I think it's so important that we treat the person and not the injury.
yeah,
Um, and if it's, I have a little seventh grade girl that she had a patella dislocation, and I give her corny jokes, and I just try to make her laugh every day.
yeah,
And so you always treat the person, you get to know them on a professionally appropriate level.
right.
Um, and it's just, you got to, because I'll ask them questions. Okay, so what'd you learn in school today? I didn't learn anything. I said, nope, you aren't leaving here till you tell me one thing you learned. Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'll put them on the spot too. And
yeah,
I'll quiz them. I'll teach them things about anatomy.
yeah.
And the next day they'll come in. I'll be like, okay, what did I say to the front of the body is? Oh, Vince, I can't remember. So yeah, just anything to engage them and interact them as much as I can.
Yeah. No, it's because it does, the best example, and I think this is probably the same way at wherever you're at when you work at a country school. But I had a teacher tell me, when she came up to me, so she's a teacher at my kid's school at Blue River. and she was commenting on like, hey, I see on Facebook you guys do a lot of stuff with your kids, and I'm like, well, yeah, doesn't everybody do that? And she's like, no, there are kids in this community that they only go to the Moreland Fair or Walmart. And I went,
Oh,
no way. And she goes, oh yeah, that is their whole world is Northern Henry County. And um and I kind of had some perspective on that. And so when I talk to kids, I kind of gauge where they're at from or you'll hear from a teacher or a coach or something like this is their family life and stuff. And what you do and what I do is engage them a little bit. So there's a little bit of education in there somewhere that maybe that in the situation that they're in might inspire them to, yeah, education's important, or maybe I want to go to college, or maybe I want to go to trade school, or maybe I want to do these things. You just don't know the influence that you have, even though we do, because we have been doing it for years and years and years. But doing it at this level and trying to connect with those kids, as somebody that's a little more experienced, I think, is impactful. And I think that's
oh yeah.
the mindset I try to have every day is this is an opportunity, not so much like I can't believe this kid's coming in. Now, I will admit that when the middle school cheerleaders found me this year and they were trying to get out of practice, that I was like, yeah, you here's a bag of ice, you need to move on. But
Yeah.
still, a lot of times I try to tell people you got to take a look at everybody, no matter how minor it is, no matter if you know exactly what it is when they walk in the room, you still got to spend a little time with them and treat, like you said, treat the person. But yeah, the
Mhm.
middle school cheerleaders, after I looked at about three of them, I realized you guys just don't want to go to practice, so you need to move on a little bit.
Yeah. 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 You're wasting space and time.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, listen, it's noon. We've done this for 2 hours. Holy
Holy
smokes.
crap, Troy, it is.
It is. Um,
Wow.
so the last thing we'll wrap this up. Um, I just saw your post. I just saw the IATA post. You're the IATA Professional Development Committee co-chair. Um, I just saw that yesterday on Facebook. Um, and you kind of gave some advice at the end of that post. Can you, if you remember what you said, because I know sometimes I do, I say stuff and I'm like, what did I say? Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but I think the biggest thing that I remember you talking about was talking about, um, don't wait around to get involved. Find a way to get involved. So what's your advice for some younger, maybe athlete trainers that are out there like, hey, I'm thinking about this, but I don't know how to do this. What's your advice on try to get hooked into that?
Um, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, whether it's locally and depending on where you're located. I mean, if you're in a large um, urban metropolitan area, there's going to be a local athletic training club. Um, the state level, I don't think people realize how much state associations are clamoring for volunteers to step forward and get involved.
Right.
And so if it's just a simple email to the state president, hi, I'm new to this state, I'm new to the area, I'd like to get involved in some capacity, either now or in the future. You can't be afraid to reach out. All they can do is tell you no. All right. Don't be offended by that. That's how it is. Move on. All right. So try a different avenue, different approach, and so forth. So, but yes, I would say just try to look to reach out at the state level, and you might start with something very, very basic. Maybe you might be part of a history and archives committee. Who
Right.
knows? But then once your foot is in the door, then you got to be very credible on what you do. And so that means follow up. If given a task, do it and do it well and complete it. Communicate well and effectively, and others will see that. All right. And so then that gives others an opportunity. It's like, okay, well, this person's pretty credible. And if given something to do, they're going to get it done and not drag their feet. And that will help you, just your performance alone will help you advance in that regard. So take whatever small step you get and just build upon that from there. And that can lead into things down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you on that, because I think that's the thing, is that I think there's some younger people, or even guys like us, that are like, I don't have anything to offer. I um, how do I don't know how to get involved. I don't know any of those people anymore. It doesn't matter. I mean, I think that's the thing,
No, it
is
doesn't. It doesn't. Not at all.
it doesn't
And an
matter.
interesting, yeah, an interesting story, Troy. I was education committee chairperson of IATA, I don't know, 87 and 90, something like that. And so I was new to that role, but I needed to put a committee of, I don't know, 3 to 4 people together to help organize and put on the IATA Fall Symposium. And so, being in Indiana State and knowing Rick Shaw, I reached out to Rick, and Rick was at Rolls-Holman at the time,
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, Rick, would you like to get involved and help us with the IETA Education Committee?" And that was the first committee, first thing that he was on. And he was like, "Vinny, thanks so much for asking me to get involved."
Yeah.
And well, you see what Rick did with it.
Oh
Rick
yeah.
took it and he ran with it. And so, um, even if a person is in a role to where, okay, I need to put a committee together, I need to get others involved, just asking a simple question, hey, would you like to be involved with this committee? It's like I was parish council president a couple of years ago, and I needed to get new council members. You just ask them, and if they tell you no, they tell you no.
Right.
Great, thanks for being honest. Move on.
Yeah.
And
It's nothing
so,
personal. It's just people have
yeah,
lots of
it's
stuff to
not
do.
personal.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean,
So
that's the
don't
thing.
take it personal.
Yeah, and that's where where I've been, especially on this 4-H end. Um, I get asked to be on different types of stuff here in Henry County, and I was the 4-H Association president for 3 years, and I had to basically quit, because the association basically wouldn't flex the bylaws where I could be at the majority of the meetings, because they were all on Tuesday nights,
Um,
which is in the
okay.
wintertime is basketball.
Game
You
night.
know? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I just said, hey, I can't fulfill this role. I can't do it the best way I can. So I'm going to move on, but I'm going to still be involved at a local club, and and volunteer whatever I need to volunteer at. So, um,
Good for
and
you.
that's where I think, again, you can still be involved and do that stuff. I mean, and I still try to find ways to be involved athletic training wise. I'm working on a big project right now with Ball State. We're going to have a history and archives um, special collections at the library, where we're putting a lot of stuff in that people are
Oh,
going to be able
cool.
to go on the web and pull stuff up, photos, documents, all that stuff right now to do that. And that's the way I feel like I can contribute back from an athletic training standpoint. And um, so that's, I mean,
Yeah, and
personally, that's,
I'll keep my eyes and ears open too for when you put together that Ball State alumni reunion here in about a year or so.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. No, that is, I think, that's a great idea that can draw a lot of people in,
oh
um,
yeah,
and we can still accomplish what we need to accomplish and stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
But no, that's awesome. So, well, listen, I've taken up enough of your time this morning. So,
What
um,
do you mean? It's afternoon, Troy.
it's afternoon. Yeah, it is. It is. We made it to the afternoon with this, but, um, yeah, I really appreciate you being on, and talking about, telling your story, because like I said, it's a good story, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that feel the same way too when they listen to this. So, um, I still have to do some, so stay on with me a little bit, because I have to make sure things start downloading when we do this at the end, but
Okay.
we'll kind of go from there. So we've gone off the roll with Vince Stilger. I want to thank Vince for coming on the podcast. It was pretty amazing that I look up at the clock and we've talked for 2 hours about his career and letting him tell his story. So he has done just a ton of stuff, and really we didn't even touch on a lot of the stuff with the Olympics and other things that he's been involved with. But I'm so glad we talked about the Special Olympics, because I know that means a lot to him, and it's a really special way to give back, not only to a great community of athletes, but like we talked about, sometimes that fills your cup as well. And I think that's important, that we don't lose sight of that in this profession, that we need to all find things that as much as we give, may give back to us and kind of re-energize us and allow us to continue doing our jobs and know our why on why we're an athletic trainer. And I think that's really important to hear during National Athletic Training Month. Also, make sure that you give us some communication and feedback. offtherollpodcast.com or offtherollpodcast@gmail.com. There we go. Off the Roll Pod 1 on X or Twitter. There's also a place to leave comments on Spotify now, or you can reach out on my personal Facebook page to give us some feedback on this podcast. So, thanks to Vince for coming on. I hope everybody has a great day today after you listen to this podcast, and we'll talk to you later.